Hello and welcome back. I'm your host, Matthew Stell, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today for a very special edition of The Rundown. As most of you know, February is Black History Month, so today we'll be highlighting a few figures within the African American community that have brought innovation to our huge world. The national theme for this year's Black History Month is the crisis in Black education and the need to cultivate Black genius. This is a salute to a man who realized how important and necessary it was for blacks to receive an education, especially after the Civil War. That man is W.E.B. Du Bois, the founder of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, simply now known as the NAACP. Du Bois believed that every African American should have access to quality education, and he was a high proponent of higher education institutions created for African Americans. These would later become historically black colleges and universities. Du Bois most famously disagreed with another leader in the African American community, Booker T. Washington, who believed that blacks should compromise with whites and that Southern blacks should continue good behavior in hopes of receiving basic educational rights and economic opportunities. Du Bois vehemently opposed this idea, stating in the Niagara Movement papers that we believe also in protest against the curtailment of our civil rights. Du Bois also popularly coined the term talented tenth in an article titled The Negro Problem. In the article, Du Bois describes the likelihood that 1 out of 10 African American males would become the leaders of not only their race, but also leaders in the field of medicine, education, and social change. Before his death in 1963, Du Bois said these famous words that continue to resonate today: "The cost of liberty is far less than the cost of oppression." A good friend of Du Bois and co-founder of the NAACP was Ida B. Wells. Born in northern Mississippi during the Civil War, Wells was the daughter of slaves. After the war, and of course after the Emancipation Proclamation, Wells and her family became very active in local politics in the Republican Party. She attended Shaw University, but was expelled due to rebellious behavior. One afternoon, Wells confronted the college's president due to his lack of carrying out any policies that he promised to the student body. With this, she became known as the Fiery Woman to the surrounding community and eventually throughout the entire southern United States. In the May of 1884 in Memphis, Tennessee, Wells was ordered to leave a ladies-only train and move to the smoking section of the train. She refused and was dragged out by 3 men. Wells returned to Memphis with a black lawyer to sue the railroad company, but lost when the company paid off her lawyer. Wells persisted and returned a second time, but with a white attorney, winning the case and was awarded $500 in damages. After the train incident, Wells decided to enter into the field of investigative journalism. Her main goal was to educate the rest of America about the horrors of lynching in the South. Her findings found that lynching was a form of community control and was to be used as an inhumane scare tactic for especially black men. Throughout the rest of her life, Wells was not only an advocate for African American rights, but the rights for women, working alongside Susan B. Anthony in the suffrage movement. She is famously nicknamed the first black feminist for her work. One of my favorite quotes from Wells simply says, "There must always be a remedy for wrong and injustice, but only if we know how to find it." And finally, the last individual we will highlight today is Carter G. Woodson, the true founder of Black History Month. Woodson believed that African Americans needed a week to celebrate their history and began Negro History Week in 1928. Over time, it would become an entire month, and in 1976, it was fully recognized by the federal government. Woodson, who began his career as a journalist, believed that if black history was not celebrated, it could eventually become forgotten. Woodson said, quote, "If a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated." Woodson was the second African American to earn a PhD from Harvard, second only to his good friend, W.E.B. Du Bois. Woodson was also very instrumental in assisting other African Americans trace their roots back to their homeland in Africa. After his death in 1950, he continued to be remembered as one of the best African American historians to this day. There are many figures within the African American community that have made history, but also wrote history at the same time. We shall never forget their struggle, and we should never turn astray from the trails that they have blazed for us. This Black History Month, I hope that you made an impact in someone else's life, but I also hope that you understood that while the history of African Americans here in the United States wasn't always great, but that Black history is and will always be American history. Thank you for tuning in, and for all of us here at Coug TV, we hope to see you next time.